Disneyland celebrates some famous women in its history and some important inspirational icons, as New Orleans Square gets ready to reimagine how it serves pirates and people. Downtown Disney is getting ripped down as new projects pop up at all 3 Disneyland Resort hotels, and it's time to say goodbye for now, but not forever, as ToonTown is going away for the next year. It's your weekly Disneyland update of everything new at the Disneyland Resort. Hey friends, before we get started, let me introduce you to the coolest person that lives in the state of New Mexico.
That's awesome.
Friends, as I head off to Walt Disney World, it is my last visit inside of ToonTown for the next year plus, and I have to say, I'm eager for an update, but kind of dreading losing the land and losing the progress of this project. But I'm going to head in right now for my last trip around ToonTown. Friends, it's your weekly update of everything new inside of Disneyland this week. Bricky here with your weekly update.
All right, friends, it's time to look at all the new things I was able to find this week out at the Disneyland Resort. And one of the things I found that I enjoyed the most was paying tribute to 2 important women in Disneyland's history, both Minnie Mouse and Lillian Disney. Here we see the Mickey flower bed changed over to Minnie Mouse for the month, and we see the Lily Bell attached to the Disneyland Railroad doing laps around the Santa Fe Express. And man, oh man, is that such a cool way to pay tribute to 2 iconic women in Disney's history. One who's always been there for Mickey, who gets a lot of attention, but Minnie has really come up in the years of quietly becoming the favorite character in the park. And then you have Lillian Disney, the woman who was cool enough to let her husband sell their Palm Spring vacation home to pay for this theme park. Thank you, Lillian, for understanding that your husband was insane, and we've all benefited from his insanity. But that's not the only dedication we were able to find this week, because over at the edge of Avengers campus, there is now this plaque paying tribute to Stan Lee and dedicated the land in his honor, which is very awesome because without Stan Lee, you wouldn't have Spider-Man and so many of these other characters. So cool to just see this little fun piece just randomly show up. And speaking of randomly showing up, Food and Wine Festival randomly showed up on Wednesday, and unfortunately I was on a grind to make it to my Florida trip and I didn't get to sample any of the food. But man, oh man, if I wasn't on that schedule, this would have been the best day to do it, because literally they were all just a walk up and you could have really done a lot of damage without the massive crowds. Food and Wine kicks off this Friday, and I'm assuming there'll be so many other channels covering it with great detail. And along with Food and Wine randomly opening up, so did the Magic Key Terrace. So if you're a Magic Key member, your clubhouse awaits you. More to come on this space in the future when I get back from Florida. All right, let's hop over to a new construction project. That's why it's in What's New and not over in our construction section, coming up later in this week's update. And thank you so much for hanging out with me. But I showed you just a random little clip last week that I had noticed that something was being built over in the Lilo parking lot, or is it Lilo? Anyways, this little building is being constructed in the far back corner of this parking lot. And I was trying to figure out what it could be. Are they building some sort of administration building, or could it have something to do with the upcoming DVC tower? Whenever you live in a big city like New York or Toronto or downtown Los Angeles, often when corporations will build condominiums or townhomes, they'll build samples so that people can see what it is that they're buying. So I'm going to bet that this is either a small administration building that's popping up, or potentially a sample of what the DVC suites will look like. So when people are getting ready to buy points and become a member of this new tower, that will be the 4th tower at the Disneyland Hotel, that this will give them an idea of what they're buying. Those are the 2 best guesses I've got. But last week they only had the foam yellow installation, and now this week we can see that they have started to put together the metal framing or aluminum framing for this structure. So definitely will be interesting to see what this looks like in 2 weeks when we come back to doing our updates. And another new project that caught my eye last week that I didn't film because I couldn't quite understand what was going on, but thanks to Google Maps, I've looked up overhead. there's a project going on at the edge of the Grand Californian Hotel. It looks like some sort of path or walkway is going in. Now, I didn't have a room at the Grand Californian, so I could only walk so far into this to film. But if we look up overhead, you could see the Grand Californian already has its own artery and path system. So why would there be something else that they're building on the far side? My guess is either to make this an easier area for Grand Californian Hotel guests to cruise around, or with the upcoming DVC tower that's being built over at the Disneyland Resort, and also whatever's going on over at the Pixar Pier Hotel. I'm going to tell you, one day soon that's going to happen. This could be a new way for guests to get inside of the park, because if the western end of downtown Disney expands and they want to bring this area into a much faster way to get into the action, it would make sense. This will be one we'll keep tracking and monitoring and figure out how we can get a better view of it. And as I was looking last week over at the West End construction project that's happening in downtown Disney, I saw this out of the corner of my eye. Something was happening over at the Paradise Pier Hotel. And so this week I went to go investigate that, and it looks like they're working on the pool out back. Somebody else had told me that they had stayed there and heard a lot of noise, but I assumed that they were talking about the noise that you would hear from the West End Downtown Disney project. So putting all of this together, it looks like they're putting a ton of energy into this hotel. Is it finally going to match the land that it's named after? Will it finally become the Pixar Pier Hotel? I've been making videos on this subject matter since 2019, 2020, waiting for them to finally brand it accordingly, and maybe this is an indication that it's happening. But if we do the math, the Disneyland Hotel has the DVC tower that's being constructed. We'll look at that in our construction segment. And now the Paradise Pier Hotel has some construction going on it, and the Grand California Hotel has some construction that's going on. So maybe a good summer to stay off-site, off-property, if you are sensitive to loud noise, because it looks like there's going to be a lot going on this summer as far as the hotels go. And makes sense because Disney's probably catching up for lost time. Moving over to downtown Disney, we can see that the celebration of Soulfully has wrapped up. I'm going to give it a strong, nice try. That's my review. The announcement was bigger than the actual results, and I hope that Disney, if they do Soulfully next year, that they commit to it a little bit more and offer up a little bit more so that it does feel like a resort-wide celebration of Black History Month, because it was a little bit hard to find where the celebration was at. We can also see that the Magic Key photo op has been removed because Magic Key Holder Celebration Month is over. You are no longer celebrated. And the ESPN, former ESPN zone entrance into the park is now open, which is huge, because if you're somebody that likes to walk in to the park, you no longer have to walk over to the Disneyland Hotel and come in that other entryway. So this is going to save a lot of steps for people that for some reason hate the tram. All right, friends, let's look at the future of Pirates of the Caribbean for 2022. We have learned that the ride is going down for pretty extensive refurbishment. Disney is saying that it's going to open sometime in summer, which in Disney talk, that means sometime in the month of June or July. But is this really all about just closing Pirates? Because our friends over at Mice Chat did a really great article talking about how Disney is going to reimagine some of the walkways around New Orleans Square. And as you know, I have been filming this area for quite some time now, and it is one of the most congested areas of the park. When Pirates was open, they just didn't really think about how big Disneyland would get and its immense popularity. Also, with Fantasmic coming back, you have some genius somewhere whose name I do not know that stood at the banks of the rivers of America with Disney management around him and said, let's turn this into a multi-level amphitheater and do a nighttime show over there on the island. Brilliant, brilliant idea. Oh man, what an execution to bring this to life. So what I'm hearing from Mice Chat, which is always a very reliable source, and every time I see Dusty in the park, he is such a sweet guy and always very nice and kind to me with his information and his know-how. What I'm seeing is this. they are going to open up some of these walkways. As you remember, we had Project Stardust, which is a combination of Star Wars and pixie dust, where they went around the park widening walkways, making it easier for the modern levels of crowds to navigate through Disneyland. And the idea was Star Wars Galaxy's Edge is going to be so popular that we're going to need to get people back there as efficiently as possible, because it was built in a part of the park that had always been backstage. However, what we really saw was it just made it easier for everyone else to walk around, because Star Wars Galaxy's Edge wasn't the big draw that they were anticipating in the early days. And in fact, what Project Stardust really did for all of us is it made the park way more accessible to get through, both for folks that are walking, but also for our friends that are on wheels. It just made it a much friendlier park for everyone. So when I hear that Project Stardust is coming back to life, but in New Orleans Square, I celebrate that. And as much as I enjoy the different multi-levels of this area, I do know that it can be very hard to walk through. I can only assume that it's very hard to roll through. So looking at this from the perspective of citizens of Disneyland everywhere, Pirates is beyond a doubt one of the top 5 attractions at the park, but I am willing to let it go for a few months to not only better it, but the experience of getting around it. So to be very curious to see what happens in this area. We'll be tracking it week to week. We've already seen a little bit of sidewalk work that's going on, but I really applaud this effort to try to make this a friendlier and a more navigatable part of Disneyland. Whoever knew that one of the most beautiful parts of the park would become Mater's Stroller Graveyard. We'll keep you posted on how this develops, but I think this is really exciting news. Well, friends, it's time to say goodbye to ToonTown. We've been given more than enough heads up to know that this was getting ready to happen, but I'll bring you up to speed if for some reason you don't know the whole backstory. Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway is being constructed in a former part of ToonTown that was backstage. So this does mean that Disneyland has officially gotten one attraction larger in the scale of its footprint for us, the guests. But in doing this, they had to rip out the entire back facade, and slowly over the last weeks, we've been seeing them rebuild this facade and reimagine it in a different way. Now, we all knew this was going to happen, but what we didn't know that Josh D'Amaro revealed out at the theme park convention that happens in Orlando earlier this year is that in doing this, they're completely reimagining the flow of ToonTown, adding in what they say is a picnic space or a green space, putting in a fictional tree that is the Walt's wishing tree, a lot like a tree that Walt dreamed under as a young one himself. The idea is to make this part of the park even friendlier to families and to the youngest citizens of Disneyland. ToonTown, as you know, you have to go underneath the Disneyland Railroad, so it is a captive land, meaning that unless your kids get so far away from you that they run underneath the Disneyland Railroad, and there's quite a stretch of walkway before you get to there, kids can be kids here. They can run around, and there's a high probability that they won't get away from you, even though you might lose sight of them for a minute or two. It was also explained to us that this edge of ToonTown, where we see Goofy's house, Donald's boat, and strangely, Gadget's Go Coaster, were all going to be reimagined. Now, we don't know what that means. We don't know if they're going to get torn down or it's a repaint job, new characters. We don't exactly know what that reimagining means. I think they're going to keep the structures, but reimagine the people flow, how the guests can interact and get around these 3 items. I'm assuming that Gadget will probably get a different theme, maybe instead of one singular theme, like dump in a bunch of different characters, so it's more of a ToonTown coaster and a way for the younger citizens of Disneyland to see lots of the characters that make them excited and feel invited in this really interesting land. But as the construction walls went up and we saw them working on the El Capitan Theater, we started to notice that this project was pretty big in scale and they are going fast on it. And it only makes sense that they would want to completely close down the land if they're going to redo the walkway. Redoing the walkway would mean that the Jolly Trolley is finally going to get removed and those railroad tracks will come out. What will be the fate of the old train yard. They went out of their way to show us that there's a new fountain that will be showing up as a centerpiece. So then it goes back to what will happen to the two existing fountains, both the fountain in front of Mickey's house and then the other fountain that exists over by Roger Rabbit. There is a lot going on in this relative small land. There's a lot of theming and a lot of design, but there's also a lot of wasted space. So as someone who has a trained design eye, I can fully understand where shifting some of these items around, removing some things that don't make sense, but working on a better people flow, opening up a little bit more so there's a greater flow, could give younger families and younger citizens of Disneyland a better experience. So the sad thing is, we won't know what this is going to look like until next year. But the good news is this is going to be a significant improvement to a town. See, I'm totally fooled by the theming. To a land that I think a lot of people kind of roll their eyes at. Because if you are an adult that comes to the park and you don't have young ones, it would be easy to see this as a waste of space. Now, I am in that category of people that don't have kids and I come here as an adult, but I really do love this land and I understand its importance for the younger citizens of Disneyland, and I love the theme of it. The buildings, the way that they're painted, the art style guide that they use here where everything has what I refer to as a bend or swell in it. It does feel like a very good combination of our real world sensibilities, but with the animation facade. You understand that it's a firehouse, but a firehouse that would exist inside of a cartoon. I am sad because I realized that this means this land's going to be closed during the holiday season, and it decorates so well as part of the holidays. So I took my last lap. I walked around. I've been filming this land a lot since we got back into the park because I want to have a lot of footage to show you all when it reopens, an A and a B shot. A, this is what it looked like before, and B, this is what it looks like now. So we can critique it and fully understand all of the different design details that have been planted in there for a better experience. But it is hard to say goodbye. Like, you just don't know when it's time to walk back under the berm because you just want to soak it all in. Because Disney's been so coy on what all will be different. So I just wanted to live in it one more day the way that it was. I'm not going to lie to you, this isn't my favorite land in the park, but it's far from my least favorite, and I really enjoy it for what it does. And what it does is it gives a playground to young citizens of Disneyland that finally they can get out of the stroller, they can get out of the cart, they can run around and be kids and burn off some of that power, some of that energy that isn't always so welcomed in a tight switchback where kids want to climb all over the bars and bump into other guests and slow down the line flow. The rules here are all set up for them, and I enjoy that celebration. And I also have to say that Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway is a fantastic ride. And Kenny P. Rocks, the man, the poet, said we are going to get additional enhancements. And because he's the poet, you always have to break down what is Kenny P spitting out at us. What I'm hoping for, and there have been people that have diagnosed that our attraction is a long rectangular shape. The one out at Disney's Hollywood Studios is more of a squatty or square shape, and this one's bigger, and there is room for an additional show room or two. I'm hoping that those additional scenes are themed either around the great state of California or Disneyland itself. Either way, this attraction is going to bring in guests of all ages because it's going to be one of the must-ride attractions inside of Disneyland. Therefore, reshaping this space so that there is room for the families, but also a room for the guests that just want to rip Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. The land is now going to have to service two different communities of Disneyland all at the same time. So it is really smart to deconstruct it and to come up with a better flow. And I hope some of these eateries over here and restaurants actually get used again, because the little community, the main street area of this land is really, really sweet. And in my mind, this land had always been underused, and I hope this is going to birth new life into this land. So ToonTown, I say goodbye to you for now, but not forever. And I cannot wait to go back under the berm and get lost inside of all of your details again.
Friends, it's never fun to say goodbye, but at least it's goodbye for now and not goodbye forever. ToonTown, I cannot wait to come back and visit you next year and ride Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway West Coast Edition with additional scenes. Please let that scene either be about California or Disneyland. I'll see you in a year, Mickey's house.
All right, fellow citizens of Disneyland, it's time to look at your weekly update on construction. Quickly, we're just going to look at the DVC tower that's showing up, the fourth tower over the Disneyland Hotel. We can see that there is a significant amount of rebar over on the north side of this construction project. So hopefully in a couple of weeks when update is back, we'll see this project start going vertical. Now let's move over to the big one, which is the west end of Downtown Disney construction project. We can see that the building that was once home to the Starbucks, and behind that were a couple of the screens from the old AMC movie theater. We can see that that has just been completely demoed. If we go back to last week, they had just kind of started mangling it and ripping it apart, and they had these shields up to try to limit the amount of dust that would blow over into Downtown Disney or across the street over to the Grand Californian Hotel. But now we can see that they are just full on demoed out, removing this box, which would make sense because they were saying that the monorail would be back in operation on March 6th. So they started on this corner, which I believe is the eastern corner of the West End project. They have removed out this theater, the Starbucks. So I'm assuming that once they get a lot of this debris out of the way, that we'll see the monorail come back up because it can safely operate away from all this construction. And then I'm assuming they will move over to the Sugar Boo section and also be removing more of the theaters. But as we look at this project from everywhere, whether we're standing inside of Downtown Disney, looking over the construction walls, or behind it, standing over by the edge of the Paradise Pier Hotel or up on the Paradise Pier Hotel parking garage, you can really see the scale of just how much has been removed and how quickly they did it. It was just 2 weeks ago or 2 update episodes ago where we saw the one little tractor that was penetrating and breaking through the back end of the old AMC theater. So in a couple of weeks, they have really taken out a huge portion of this former part of Downtown Disney, which I think bodes well for the monorails coming back for our March visitors out at the resort. And if they can keep this pace up, I would say by the end of this month or some point in April, definitely by May 1st, we could see this entire footprint back to zero, which would mean that phase 1 of the construction project will have been completed to where first thing you have to do is removal. Then the next thing that we will see them do is start working on the land, getting the land level. We'll see some concrete work. Whatever needs to go into the base will be step 2. So once these buildings are all gone, then we can figure out when we're officially into phase 2 of this project. They haven't given us a completion date, but I am very impressed at how fast this part has gone down. Really impressed. And it's fun to see things like this happening because it shows a commitment to money and a commitment to keeping the parks moving and growing. Can't wait to see how this area has developed when we're back here in 2 weeks for episode 17 of Update. All right, friends, it's time to look at our project tracker where we look at all the various projects going on around the resort. And I'm going to go ahead and this week include our refurbishments into it because it's kind of been a lot of the same. So we'll just put it all together. But we can see that the World of Color show is slowly getting back together for its Friday, April 22nd premiere. And we can see they're just still in the testing process. They've got all the lighthouses open where we can see the tech. And as I showed you last week, that bundle of goods that was sitting around one of the lighthouses, I was correct in my assumption that those panels have been installed to the bottom of some of the lighthouses. So therefore it kind of acts as a buffer between the bottom of the lighthouse and the water level. When they're not there, you can look in and see how this sits up on top of a concrete podium. So those have been applied to some, but not to all. But it was a pretty good guess on what those pieces exactly were. And now moving over to the other show that everybody is excited about that's coming back to kick off Memorial Day weekend is fantastic. And they've been doing a lot of work over here on Sailing Ship Columbia. You can see workers all around the boat working on the different harnesses and wiring systems. As you know, this is a big reveal and fantastic. It is so fun to see people standing there that don't know that somehow Disney snuck a giant pirate ship into the rivers of America, and when the cannonball goes off, it is definitely my favorite moment to see who's there for the first time and who's been there for a long time. So fun to see these workers all working to get Fantasmic back up online to kick off all of our Memorial Day weekends and the beginning of summer at the Disneyland Resort. All right, this is a new section for people that are hardcore. It's called Scrim Wars. Do you like the khaki pair of pants scrim, or do you like the scrim that actually looks like the building that's behind it? Please, Disney, get back into using these type of scrims. Scrim Wars, I'm out. Splash Mountain has been down since January. It's its annual refurbishment because water destroys everything, but the water's back, baby. And we can see that Splash Mountain is getting ready to come back to us on March 7th. So it'll be exciting to hear people once again falling down the waterfall and then cruising around Fowler's Harbor. And it's going to be exciting to see Splash Mountain come back to the Disneyland Resort. Indiana Jones is going to be going down briefly from March 8th through 11th, so not that big of a deal unless that's the 3 days that you're coming out to the park. And as well, we're going to see the Matterhorn bobsleds come back on March 4th, which is today. So there you go. Not that big of a closure there. I've already told you that the monorail will be coming back on March 6th, and that's looking very well with how fast the construction is going over at the west end of downtown Disney. Grizzly River Run will be down for the duration of this month, but is supposed to be back open by early April. And then Tarzan's Treehouse and Nemo. Who knows? Who knows? And also, we are losing this week Gadget's Go Coaster and Roger Rabbit Cartoon Spin for the duration of a year, as we talked about earlier, for the reimagining of ToonTown. There's all your refurbishments and closures for the month of March out at the Disneyland Resort. So there you go, friends. There's your refurbishments. But now let's get on to the thing that everybody wants to know about. It's time for Sidewalk News. Sidewalk Gang, represent. Let's look at what's been happening with these big boxes over in Hollywood. Well, you don't care? You don't care about these sidewalk developments? What? You're too cool for sidewalk developments? Oh, okay. You got to go watch another video? All right, well, try to check me out when I'm in Walt Disney World doing my live streams and vlogs. But for those of you who care, let's get into the sidewalk fun facts. All right, here we go. 101 sidewalk fun facts about Hollywoodland. Number 1. Now, did you know that the original term from concrete comes from the Greek word meaning concreta, which is a way of saying